I guess we could just do introductions. So I'm Jackie Betts, City Administrator.
Mindy Garlington, Audit Committee.
Tanya Moffett, Marine and Company, audit partner.
Danielle Groves, Marine and Company.
Kathy Brucker, Interim Finance Director.
Michael Milch, City Council member, just visiting.
So we're recording the meeting, and Councilor Reisner could not make it tonight, and Brian could not make it. So we're recording it, and it'll go on the website, and we're going to go ahead with our agenda items.
There are no decisions that need to be made. It's just informational only.
Okay.
So we hope we will receive our other two audit committee members, but if we don't, it will be on the website.
So one of the things that we want to do here tonight is just kind of go through what our audit deliverables are. So we will have an opinion on the basic financial statements, which is basically the beginning part of the financial statements, the notes to the financial statements. We will also have an independent auditor's report required by Oregon state regulations. So the Oregon state legislature has made some specific Oregon revised statutes they want us to look at. So for example, public purchasing laws. So we do some testing for compliance for some ORSs that the Senate and the state representatives have said that they want municipal auditors to specifically look at, and then we'll opine on that. And then we will also do the summary of revenues and expenditures as required by minimum standards. So what that is that's a report that goes to the Secretary of State, and it says this is the total revenue and this is the total expenditures for the entire city. And then if applicable, we'll give a management letter, and so that's any recommendations that we have that do not rise to a level that need to be reportable to council. So it's like, okay, we did testing and we found one check didn't have a signature on it. It just somehow got through the process. So it's like those really minor things, but we want to bring them to the city's attention, so we'll give a management letter just so that everybody knows what we found. And then an AUC 260 communication, that is a letter that goes to those charged with governance, and it explains about what the depreciation, some of those estimates that are in the financial statements. It explains if there's any external CPAs that are being used or accountants being used. So Kathy would be a good example of that. There will also be any recommendations if there's any audit findings as far as like if there's a misstatement when we're doing the audit, that will be listed in there. If there's any past journal entries, which means something that doesn't rise to a level that needs to be adjusted, but we found something that we know is incorrect, that would also be in that letter. So it's just a letter that kind of hits the high points. You know, these are the notes that you should look at in the financial statements. These are like the main points of the audit. It's just a letter that we address specifically to the council and to the audit committee. And then, if applicable, we would have an AUC 265 letter. And what that is if there's any reportable deficiencies. So, in auditing terms, we have reportable and non-reportable deficiencies. So, reportable deficiencies would be a material weakness, which means that the financial statements have a material error in them. And so, then if we hadn't came along and audited, there would have been a material misstatement in there. So there would have been something significantly wrong. So that's what a material weakness is. And then right below that, we have a significant deficiency, which means that we found something wrong in internal controls or in numbers, but it doesn't rise to that level like that they would be like really wrong. So those are the two levels of reportable. And then we have unreportable findings, which would be something that was very minor that we found. So if there is any of those reportable findings, it would be in an AUC 265 letter communications, and that would be addressed to the audit committee and to the city council as well. So those are our deliverables. That's what we will be giving you and the council. Does anybody have any questions on the audit deliverables?
No.
And then I'll let Danny go through the audit approach.
Same audit approach this year as last year, a little bit condensed time frame this year. Hope we won't have to extend this year like we did last year. So we were out here at the end of July, beginning of August, and did our interim work. which is a lot of the planning work. We look at controls in place that the city has, and do, since we do a risk-based audit, as we're going through that, that's what we're looking for, to really assess our risk and then develop our audit procedures from there. So we did a lot of inquiries during interim, walkthroughs, stuff like that. We will be out here at the beginning of December to do field work, and that's where we'll come out and actually do the remaining audit areas, do a lot of the actual testing, of bank reconciliations and looking at the more specific items. We evaluate all our results at that point, and then have a exit conference with management. Usually, as we're in the field, letting them know kind of the status of where we're at, what we're doing. And then, back in the office, we'll review the financial statements. Kathy's drafting the financial statements this year, so we'll have those to review, complete all the deliverables, and then with the hope that we'll present to the audit committee in January. But we will issue by December 31st.
So I need to make sure I'm available that means that you're here at the end of the week for you to talk or not.
If it works, great. If not, it's really easy to get a hold of you.
Okay.
And if there was something that rose to the level where we wanted to talk to you, we wouldn't wait till the end of the week anyway.
Okay.
We'd be trying to find you.
Jackie's running away.
So that is the week around?
Nope, I'm here.
You're
I just
here.
wanted to
Okay,
make sure.
yeah.
And since we're so close, we can always even schedule something
Okay.
after the fact if we need to, so.
Any questions about any of that? Okay.
So that's all done before you come back to the audit committee? And you come to us before you go to city council?
Yes. Yeah.
And in any part of that, is there a budget anything? There's nothing to do with budget.
Well, we'll be getting the calendar out in December for the budget committee.
Oh, okay.
But that will, of course, be forward-looking for the next biennium.
So what they're doing has nothing to do, has no changes needed, or we are beyond the budget?
We are beyond the budget.
Okay.
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
One more question then. This is all relating to the fiscal year ending in June 2018.
Correct.
The year that, and even though we have a biennial budget, you still do an audit one fiscal year at a time.
Yep.
The
Correct.
state requires that you have an annual audit, so even though you have a biennial budget, you always still have an annual audit. And the reason for that is that way if there was something going on, hopefully it would be caught within, a year versus 2-year period. So that's a state requirement. Do you want to do that one and then I do this one, or which one do you want to do? It doesn't matter to me.
We do like to do a fraud discussion, and that's something that we do with management, and then we also do with audit committee and counselors. You either already received a letter from us, or you will be receiving a letter from us. I apologize, I did not check that before I came here today, and all the clients blend together as far as when we send them out. But it basically is a fraud discussion. Do you have any concerns, any allegations of fraud, any concerns about fraud, any concerns of non-compliance with any laws or regulations? So those are the type of questions that you'll be getting. We have found that we get a better response usually when we send it out via email. We used to call, and it seems to always catch people off guard, and so their immediate reaction is no concerns, none of this. But if they get there, then they can kind of think about it, and not necessarily a fraud concern, but maybe a specific area that they're interested in or want to make sure that we take a look at.
And it's anonymous.
It is. No, well, you will sign it and send it back to us, but
City staff does
city
it,
staff
though.
does
Yeah.
not know.
Okay.
And I
Did you
believe it
fill one
was
out
a
last year?
snail mail letter
It is a
that
snail
has already been completed and sent back. It's probably, not last year, but the one for this year,
For
I
this
think
year already
came,
went,
I
maybe.
think at least 3 or 4 weeks ago.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
I don't recall
Great.
seeing
Okay.
anything.
Okay.
So, and I do the mail at my house.
Okay, we'll check that.
We'll double check it.
But my husband did.
He signed it for you.
I know.
That's one of the things that'll be in the AUC.
Yeah, against me.
And I know that we're not, we don't have the full audit committee, but are there anything that you want to anything that you want to make sure that we're looking at, that you want to discuss now, or have any concerns that you would like to bring up in this forum? Otherwise, we can, we are always available.
I only have one thing, and I know that the city has addressed it, which is the water bill thing. But I think that it would be helpful if the people of Gladstone, anybody that cared to listen, it might be only 10 people, but sometimes it only takes a few people to start a storm, that they are assured that what the city has done is A, what they said they would do, and B, that's going to work for the fix.
Utility billing.
The utility building
that we
thing.
had, or-
Yeah,
Yes,
and I
okay.
hear you, and
Yeah.
I follow it, but I think it's really important for these guys to assure the city folks that everything that the city said they were going to do, they have done, and all of the people that didn't pay either are paying or have a plan, and you guys are okay with everything that has happened.
Yeah.
Okay.
That was already on our,
Well, of course it was. I am
list, but-
behind the eight ball. Thank
No,
you.
no, 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 no.
We
Just-
reported it.
They brought it up right away.
Just that
Okay.
as soon as it happened, they called us and let us know.
I just think
so.
it would be important for you guys to have like an open footnote on that, so that, how do I say it, like, a PS, we looked into this and this is fine.
I don't know that we can do that with our
Okay.
rules, but
Okay.
we definitely, if something came to our attention while we're looking at it, then we would report that.
Okay.
Well, I guess even just stating that when we recognized it, we reported it, that's the kind of public
I
message.
think so
Yeah,
too.
We're just
yeah.
trying to make sure, yeah.
That nobody thinks that they're trying to sweep it under the audit,
Yeah.
which we know they're not.
Yep.
We just need everyone to
Understand.
know
Yep.
that.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
So there's a few new GASBs, which is the Government Accounting Standards Board. So for government audits, we're under the GASBs, and these guys have been really busy. As you can see, there's a whole bunch of them here. So this year for implementation, the biggest one is GASB 75, which is other post-employment benefits. And what that is we've always had other post-employment benefits, also referred to as OPEB on the financial statements, but the rules around it have changed a little bit, and it's very similar to the pension note where we had this large pension liability that went on the financial statements. So now we're going to have this OPEB liability that's going to be on the financial statement. So that's going to be the main change. So if you look at the June 30, 2017 compared to the June 30, 2018, they're not going to be comparable because there's this new rule for GASB 75. It's not going to be as significant of a number. It's not going to be nearly as large as the pension number, but there is going to be these new numbers that are going on the financial statements and a new note that's significantly longer for the other post-employment benefits. What that means, because OPEB, what does that mean? So what OPEB is it's really those individuals that have retired or left the city, but they're not eligible for like Medicare or Medicaid yet. And so it's that short period of time in between there, they're eligible for healthcare retirement benefits through the city. So even though they may be paying for it themselves, they're typically older, and so they are increasing the cost for the entire pool because you've got these older retired individuals in your pool. And so what the other post-employment health care benefit is essentially the difference between those. Like if you didn't have those people in your pool, your price would be lower for everybody else. So yes, they're paying their rate, but there's this, they bring up the whole amount for the entire pool, so it's kind of that little piece there. Does that make sense? It's that little, they're bringing up the pool, so.
Okay, are there any other, is there anything else besides healthcare that would be addressed in this?
There could be
leftover vacation pays, or for some reason they're getting...
There could potentially be, but for the city of Gladstone, the only one that I'm aware of that they offer is the health care.
Healthcare, okay.
Some other entities have special agreements with maybe former city managers or high-level executives where they get some sort of payout later on for something with their retirement. For the city of Gladstone, the only thing that we're aware of is the health care.
Okay.
Yeah. So typically with like the vacation pay, typically that is paid out on the last day of employment.
Okay.
So those things are immediately taken care of, so there's not that carryover that is like, you know, hanging out there as a liability.
So our entire GASB 75 pool is for healthcare?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And it uses the term post-employment. Does anyone who leaves employment qualify for these benefits, and are they paid up until you also made the distinction that they're not eligible for Medicare yet. Do these benefits from the city stop being paid once they are eligible for Medicare?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And even though if they've not attained some defined normal retirement age, they still get some benefits after leaving employment?
Yes, it depends on how the plans are set up. So the city is included with CIS, County Insurance Services, right? Like City County Insurance, yeah. So they have a plan, and then also there's a plan that's a part of Oregon PERS, Public Retirement System. It's called RHIA. And so the city has those two options, and so it's just those people that are in between that time period. So.
But somehow they're paying into that benefit. It's just still got to be shown. Am I correct in saying that?
It's not the entire amount. It's
right.
like that difference because the whole pool. So the city is paying for the individuals that are still employed with the city,
right.
And so their benefit is higher. And so it's really that it's called an implicit subsidy, and so it's that difference between those is really what it is. So.
Okay.
And then they just have special rules about how they calculate it. The actuaries calculate it, so it's not a number that city employees are trying to, you know, throw a dart at the dartboard. They have very specific science based on lifespan and how long until they get to that level and stuff. So the actuaries are the ones that actually come up with the numbers for CIS and for RHIA. The other one is GASB 85, which is the Omnibus 2017. And it really talks about like blending component units and timing of the measurement of the OPEB. It really, most of it is not going to affect the city of Gladstone. So there's just a little bit of some clarifications that happened with it. An omnibus, what it means is that they basically have all these little things that they need to fix in all these old GASBs, these ones that are in the past before 85, and so it's not enough to go and change them completely, so they throw all these little tiny pieces into one. And so if you were to go read it, it talks about classification of real estate is one section, measuring certain money market investments, and so it's like these little tiny pieces. None of them are really going to affect the city of Gladstone, but it's just so that you know that that's out there. It's really clarifying and fixing GASBs that needed some additional help or some additional clarification is what the omnibus is. GASB 86 is certain debt extinguishments, and what this is that basically all debt extinguishments will now be treated as like bond refunding, and so there's going to be some additional note disclosures that are required with those. In the past, if it was a bond refunding, there were some very specific things that you had to do, but let's say you paid off a vehicle car loan early, you didn't have to put anything in the notes. Now you have to put some information in there saying we paid this off early, you know, so that everybody knows that you've taken care of this debt that maybe had 3 or 4 more years on it or something like that. So it's a pretty simple pronouncement. I don't think that will affect the city this year, but it's still there for in the future if that happens. And then for future years, for next year, which is the June 30, 2019, there's GASB 83, which is certain asset retirement obligations. This really has to do with legally enforceable obligations. So this has a lot to do with like, nuclear sites that are being like closed down, and then you have decommission, when you're decommissioning them, or maybe a dam or something like that. So you have some future obligation to take care of that because there's a nuclear reactor, or if it's a dam, you've got to take out the parts that are in the water or whatever it is. So there's some future obligation that you're going to have to do for retiring these assets. So you're just recording something on the books. This I don't think will have any effect on the city of Gladstone at this time.
Let's
so.
hope not. Okay.
And then GASB 88, certain debt disclosures. This has to do with if there is an asset that is basically collateralized by some debt. So let's say that the sewer fund goes out and borrows money to do something, and whatever they're purchasing, let's say that it's part of the treatment plant, that is maybe the collateral. The treatment plant is the collateral for it. You've got to now specify in the notes what the collateralization is for every piece of debt if there's anything that's collateralized by it. So if you purchased a new police car with like capital lease financing, then that would also be on the books that's collateralized by the vehicle. So it's a little bit of that. Also, lines of credit. Now, if you have unused lines of credit, they now have to be listed in the notes. So, if the city had a line of credit for $200,000, you just have to let people know that you have that potential that you could go out and borrow those funds. So that's really what the debt, the GASB 88 certain debt disclosures is.
So would that include our property for the new police and city hall would be considered?
It's not collateralized against the notes.
It's not?
Not at
Okay.
all. It's, the urban revenue notes are based on the urban revenue tax increments, that we get in on that. And then the full faith and credit is based on just the financial soundness of the city, more or less, stating that the city is guaranteeing that they will pay it. So there's not, a specific piece of property or something like that is guaranteeing those. Also, too, doesn't that on the certain debt disclosures, don't we have to disclose bank loans now, too? Will we have to with that? Are bank loans in there? Which currently are not, but I was wondering, is that coming on?
You mean like a line of credit, or?
Well, line of credit, or just even say a bank loan, a direct placement loan.
Oh, direct placement
Yeah.
loan. Yes, that's part of it as
Yeah,
well.
that's
what we borrowed.
We've got a direct placement on part of it.
TIF loans would be the other
Yeah.
thing that would have a little bit more disclosures if you got a tax incremental debt.
Yeah, so it will, I was planning on, as far as for next year, if I'm involved with the statements, we would be disclosing fully, even though it is a bank placement.
It is a debt.
We would still, yes, you'd
Okay.
still want to disclose it.
The biggest thing with that statement is just making sure that the public is aware that you have this obligation out there, and so and just giving a little bit more information as to what assets collateralized by it, that there's this opportunity to draw down some more debt or something like that in the next fiscal year, as maybe unused credit or something like that.
Okay.
The next one is for June 30, 2020, and this is GASB 84. It's fiduciary activities. And so they have changed some of the criteria for identifying fiduciary activities. So this might actually affect Gladstone because you guys have like the library, what is it called? And the senior center. Yes, the library and the senior center. It has a lot to do with how to report them, whether or not they're considered a fiduciary fund anymore, or if they actually should be brought in and be a separate fund within the governmental funds. So we've still got a few years. I don't know for sure that it's going to affect you or not, but it is something that city staff will have to look at to see. They've just changed like some of the criteria for what qualified in those buckets. is a little bit different now, so.
Now, those are both considered departments of the general fund now. The library and
Okay.
the senior center.
Okay, yeah, that's
It was-
right.
it
It was
was
the
the-
opposite before,
And
okay,
it was
yeah.
one of those other
Yeah.
pieces that they've completely cut
Yeah.
off from.
Right,
like
'cause
this-
now they're separate.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Okay.
maybe it won't affect you, so I might have misspoke there, so.
So there's a lot.
But it's something
They're
to look
handled
at.
differently in some, you know.
Yeah, everybody
different
handles it a
entities.
little bit different.
Right.
And then the last big one, is June 30, 2022, and this is GASB 87, and this is leases. So now all leases that the city has will now be treated basically like a capital lease. So basically what that means is that you'll put an asset or an intangible asset on the books, and then you're going to put the liability on the books. And the biggest thing with that is that a lot of people don't realize that the city has entered into these long-term obligations, so that now they know, and then there's actually like a debt schedule that says this is what's due next year, this is what's due. It's always been in the notes, like the larger ones, but now all of them need to be reported, and there will be an asset and a liability. They offset each other, but now it's being reported so that everybody knows what those obligations are that the city is contractually obligated to
Can
pay.
you get a for instance in Gladstone on that?
The only ones I could think of right off the top of my head are say the equipment leases for copiers. That may,
They're probably a material, so you probably
Yeah.
wouldn't need to record those.
but I don't, as far as other equipment leases that we have, leases in that respect, I can't
A
think
lot of
anything
times they're the police
right away.
cars, the
And we
We've
don't
been
have
buying
those.
those.
We
Yeah.
buy those.
Yeah.
The big sewer
Yeah.
vacs we purchased.
We purchased. Yes.
Even the last fire engine, I think. we
Yeah,
bought.
everything's
Yeah.
been cash, so.
Yeah,
So
then
the
you-
only thing I can think of are the copiers.
Now, in kind of the reverse situation, though, we are gonna have a relationship with the county where we are leasing the piece of property that this building is on to the county, for $1 a year when we put our library here.
Okay.
But is that something that they would report on their?
It's both sides. So as a leaseor, there's also something that you would put on the books. So you would put basically a long-term receivable on the books, but if it's $1 a year, I don't know that it's going to be material. And then you would also put the deferred inflow, so it's kind of like a liability. So you have both. You have two sides again on the books, but as a leaseor or a leasee, it's just more common that entities are a leasee versus a leaseor. So
Okay.
I know there's a whole bunch of them, and technically there's a couple more since I made this list. We're up to GASB 90, but they're really far out, so we won't worry about those right now.
But you will begin doing some data collection now for when these become effective in
Mhm.
these future years?
Yeah, so for example, I have one client that did a whole bunch of leases this year, and so I said, you know what, by 2022 you're going to have to put all this information on it. You have all the information right now. It's probably better just to report them right now versus wait a few more years when the paperwork's not as readily available and then try to go back and do it. So we look at each individual entity to make the recommendations. You know, obviously it's up to city management and city council or to determine which ones they want to implement at what time, but we do make recommendations like that if we see something that's fit for that individual entity.
Well, that
So.
makes sense. If we have a lot of long-term leases, you wouldn't want to dig back through records 3 years old to find them.
Correct.
Better to start now.
Correct.
Yeah, okay.
And that's why we made that recommendation for that individual client, because they did like 10 capital leases this year, and so we're like, just do it now. It's just much easier. So.
Everybody knows what they are.
Yes, and we know what asset goes with them and everything like that. So.
GASB always encourages early implementation too. Few of
Oh.
us do it, but they always encourage it.
Yes, because we all don't have enough time on our hands.
Right,
but-
right.
Do any of you have any questions for us? That's kind of the end of our presentation that we had planned. Any questions for us? Any things you're concerned about? Want to know about the audit process, the deliverables, anything?
I don't think so. I think all the information that, since I've been on the audit committee, the information that you give us is pretty clear. always self-explanatory. If not, we have questions and you answer them so that we can all, you know, take notes and understand exactly what's going on, so that I appreciate.
We had some compliance issues last year when two of our general fund departments spent over the appropriated amounts, and we initiated some corrective action. Will there be reference in it to the success of implementing that corrective action? Does it kind of go back and clear up the previous year, or will that generally be a part of the report?
So yes, we typically do point out the things that have gone well. We are aware that there are some compliance issues already for the budget for
Not for this year.
not for this year,
Yeah.
but you know, so there were
There were compliance issues as far as how the budget was initially
started.
created,
Mhm.
the initial resolution,
Uh-huh.
and we have corrected that so that we can be in compliance, you know, currently, and going, you know, through the rest of the biennium. But we won't really be discussing that in the audit, because of course that is the audit's a you know, a
Point in time.
historical point in
Yes.
time look, where we're looking at the, you know, through the end of the biennium. Within the audit though, within the notes, there are discussion of budget transfers that are done. So within the notes for this fiscal year, any budget transfers that I brought to the council, those will be laid out in the notes. So shows that we're addressing and.
Good, okay.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. Yep.
As far as going back and talking about the previous year discrepancies though, from the 16,
That's
17
historical.
year, that's, and we won't, you know, that period is closed
Yes.
and done,
Yeah.
yeah.
We do go back as part of our audit and look at the findings and stuff that we had in the prior year and make sure they were addressed. And so if they weren't addressed, you would see them.
That's
Yeah,
where we
again.
would see
Yeah,
it, it's
yeah.
if we hadn't, okay,
Exactly.
got it.
Yeah.
That's a good
So,
approach.
yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you everybody for coming tonight. So, letting us come and do our song and dance show.
We appreciate your time.
Yeah.